as an intimacy coordinator, I work in film and television, and I can work in commercials with regards to like, you see these actors like in the shower with the soap suds and stuff. It's just anywhere where the performer is going to be either doing hyper-exposed work or vulnerable work, like either trauma or sexually violent stuff, like just anywhere where we are like triggered, like those, like if you read the thing and you go, that seems like a really emotionally charged, childbirth, I've done military torture scenes where, just holding space for the person who is torturing, who that's not real, and that's hard to do. And then the person being tortured, which is like, how do you make sure that person doesn't start to disassociate, like on hour 3, hour 7, hour 12, So all of these things, it's like just holding space. So I'm not really like the intimacy police so much as I'm an intimacy like facilitator, like how do we do these things in a dynamic way, in a safe way? And then after we're done, I would love for the performer, and this has been the experience so far, to feel like they had a great time playing, playing pretend. Because otherwise, and in the past, people have felt like they really went through those things, and they call it, what do you call it? When you actually experience the thing as an actor, they call it something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like a technique to really
You
go
mean
through it.
like they go full method?
Yeah, method. Yeah, method
Okay.
actors. So to actually feel the trauma is to be method and to really go there into this dark place. And it's like there's a lot of things that you can do to give the illusion of that space without getting stuck in that space. And it's a tricky situation, but with our tips and tricks and our tools and the ones that you just asked me about, it's a way for performers to go deeper into their work without losing themselves in the process or losing their sense of boundaries or consent along the way, and where they just feel they're no longer in control of their character or themselves afterwards. It's a really hard recovery when that happens. And sometimes in the past, that's what performers did. They pushed everything down, pushed through everything, and then afterwards really paid the price. So sometimes you have performers who just seem like so into it. So director doesn't know to pay attention to those things. They're like, no, this is their MO. They're like pushing through. I'm going to support that. And that's great, for the director to do that. But in the absence of an intimacy coordinator that goes, these are tricky situations. We should take them in chunks. We should take breaks and, and recenter and then keep going, because they just see that as like time wasted or money spent. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
to start seeing these actors as people who then have to go back to their regular lives, their regular scheduled programming, with everything that's happened, So one of the things that I do on set is I have the color system, which is a traffic light of systems, where I ask performers a series of questions that are relevant to the scene with regards to their boundaries. And people, in my experience, have had a lot of different kinds of boundaries. And I don't need to know why. Oftentimes that comes out in the conversation, and I hold space for that. And it is not relayed to anyone outside of just the two of us. But I'll have a red light. So those are no-go zones. Those are the zones on your body where you cannot and will not be touched. And so I ask performers, like, is there anywhere, So, and then when they say, no, I'm fine, I'm totally fine with everything, because performers love to please, So I say, that's great. Okay. So I make a note, and then I go, so you're fine being touched on the forehead? Yes. And then on the cheek, and they're like, yes. And I'm like, on the neck, and they're like, I don't know. Like, I didn't think of that. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go back to that. We'll make that a yellow. And then they're like, and then I go, and then like, how about down the arm? And they're like, I don't like to be touched in the back of my arm, or I don't like it when people touch my elbow, and like just things. And you don't have to understand it so much as, take really good notes, and everybody has a thing. Everybody has a thing. The front of my stomach, my belly button. Do not touch my face. Some people are like, do not touch my face, and do not touch my hair. Very important, so you have to like understand trauma, and you do have to understand and hold space for people's boundaries, and you have to know what questions to ask. And that's, I guess, where it comes in handy to be, and necessary and critical, I would say, to be a certified intimacy coordinator versus just a self-proclaimed caring about people buddy on set for you to keep you safe. It's like this job is so much more profound than that. So back to the color system. So the no-go zones are non-negotiable. I no longer need to talk to you about it. Nobody on set will scream out, "That's great. Can you just the director won't go, "Can you just maybe pull his hair, or pull her hair, pull their hair." Because that's a red zone, and they've been informed of the red zones. So that shuts the chapter on that. The yellow zones are conversations where they don't know if they have that boundary. They never thought about it. That remains red until the yellow turns green. Okay, so I just move in a way that yellow is basically red until and if it turns green. So if after an explanation, and then some people don't want their thighs to be touched, and yet there's a scene where they're going to be touched. So what if we, placed something on that space, so that there's a barrier between the two of you? And they're like, I don't know. Well, once I explain to them what that barrier looks like, and I show it to them, and I explain it to them, and then they're like, that totally will work. Or no. So then the yellow either turns green or red. But it will not remain yellow. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But it gives us a conversation starting point. And then the green zones. I'm totally fine with these. These are very comfortable for me. These are the zones where, and then I write them all down, and I express them to the other performers involved. I express it to anybody else that's going to come into contact with them in that scene, and then the director. That way, if the director wants to yell out something, then they know what parameters to do it so that it doesn't come to a halt, a screeching, traumatic halt, where they're like, no. All of a sudden, trust has been breached. Feelings are on edge. The other performer, shame, feels awful, something's happened that shouldn't have. And so, yeah, this is not a thing where only I'm not protecting people from bad people. It's missteps happen, and they can really ruin the relationship between the performer and the people in an employment position,
Absolutely.
So it's very complicated. So those are the traffic lights.
But what's interesting with the traffic lights too is when we had that conversation before, it made me think, what are my boundaries? And then it made me really wonder, so I could be prepared on set to go, okay. And again, I'm assuming even if I knew my boundaries, you go on set, you go, this might just become a boundary, right? But to know that I could have someone there and be like, hey, here's a new boundary I just discovered. And then they could relay that to the director versus having that tension and awkwardness on the set. You're very valuable.
Yeah. Well, and in that, to that point, you would normally probably push through it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And ignore the boundary. And that's what's happened in the past, I think, with most performers. And then the performer you're with, if you're with another performer, they're realizing you're uncomfortable. But if you're not saying anything, they'll just push through. So there's two of you having this terrible experience for different reasons and on different levels. And it's really, it's just really avoidable. And so,
well, here's what's interesting. Can you imagine, you should never tell your fellow actor how to act, right? So it almost seems like if I were to tell my fellow actor, don't touch me here, don't do this here, it almost seems like I'm directing them in a way, and then maybe the director's too busy and they have other stuff going on, and it's who does the actor actually talk to? So they should talk to an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah, and they usually they used to talk to each other right before saying action, and that's why it's really hard to absorb that information. But as an intimacy coordinator, I do prep, and that's days before, where I, talk to both performers about their boundaries, and then I talk to the other, performers. Like I go back to the other one and explain to them where the parameters are, and then I explain to them that that's the perimeter, These are the places where you don't want to go, and these are the places that you can and are invited to go. Within that, be spontaneous. Unless you have a director that's very choreographed, which
Mm-hmm.
happens. And then some are really like, I just want it to be natural. I don't want all these boundary conversations, And so I allow them to have that experience because even though I've created the boundary, within that, they really do, because I know this person wants to be touched. I mean, just think of it as like in real life, if you're in a relationship and you know where your partner, likes to be caressed and what have you, or what ways to communicate with them that really like resonates with them. Talk to them in the evening, never in the morning, or whatever about someone, it just deepens your intimacy. And that's just like, intimacy is an umbrella word, and that's just like any kind of connection, human connection. Works better when you deepen your knowledge of them. So these are just more tools for performers to create that parameter. And then within that, they get to really kind of experience what their character is going through, but holding space for themselves too. So I am not elevating the performer above myself. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
we are one person. We're going to go through this and we're going to do it safely so that when we're done, you know what I mean? Like when I'm done playing as a performer, I will feel whole.
Yeah.
I will feel like I played a character that is, so and so, that I do not like it. There's no relation in their lives. But from what I know and my experience and my imagination, I was able to create a safe space for that person's story to be told. So generally that's what we want. But, directors won't know the difference between someone who like has no boundaries and held their boundaries. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Except for unless they were jarred to a halt because they pushed through their boundaries and ignored them and got harmed. There's
Mm-hmm.
that. And then they shut down and cannot shoot anything anymore. There's that. In the absence of an IC, hopefully. And then the other thing is if they don't push through and they have all these boundaries and they just like have this experience, the director will just feel like it was very fluid and stuff. And, everybody was, on the same page. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm prepping a show right now, and it's just a very like it's such a team thing. It's a what do you head of department position, so you coordinate with all the other departments, so like hair and makeup, um, for specific reasons, like if it's a sexual assault scene, like this and that, like just their hair, and also if they have boundaries about their hair, to talk to hair and remind them that they're going to want to step by step explain to them what they're going to be doing and how it's going to feel, and so that they can hold space for their performers, because sometimes hair people can just be like going through it, performer disassociates, you don't even know why, you feel defensive as a hair person, you didn't do anything wrong, you are responsible for the trauma, but it's not intentional. So all of these things are avoidable, and they're costly both for the mental health of the
Mm-hmm.
performer and for the production. So it's, having someone on set that asks you the questions like you were saying before, that allow you to even consider yourself in this process. I mean, just, and give yourself permission to walk away if once you realize that you've expressed these boundaries and that they're not being held
Mm-hmm.
safely by the production, to just understand that this is one production of very many. You will not be like ostracized for taking care of yourself. And if you are, in my experience, I have always felt really happy that I, expressed myself. And like, I don't regret having come forward in the LA Times article. I don't regret anything, even with all of the the consequences, the fallout of it. I feel like the importance of it outweighed what it is I was doing. My 30-second commercials, it's like, that was great. I always wondered why I was working so much. Like, I'm working so much. I'm doing 10 commercials a year for my entire career and like love it. But like, why me? Why not somebody else? And I just kept wondering when it would just like stop. But I also never took a vacation. I was always available at Christmas and Thanksgiving and like traveled at really odd times so that I was never out of the city when they needed me. Like
Right.
there's other reasons why I was valuable to the industry, but I wasn't like, it wasn't my identity. So I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to figure out like, where do I put my strengths now, which
Yeah.
is what I did when I was 15. It's what I did when I was 17. It's what I did when I was 20. And so this is just an evolution of that. And I can probably think back to my mom going straight into being a teacher from high school and then finding out that most people go to university at some point in her career. Maybe 10 years into her career, people were going to university and coming out making more than her, even with less experience. And
Right.
so she decided with 3 kids to go back to University of Ottawa and get her master's. And
Fascinating.
with all of us running around the house, she
Mm-hmm.
was teaching, going to school at night, doing work, and raising 3 kids. So um, just her pivot was so powerful. My dad got hurt at work, um, like physically, like he broke his back in several
Oh.
places. He had to learn to walk again, and he became an at-home dad. And so walking us to school, making us lunches, putting the Band-Aids on our knees, just like like an excellent example of, you know, having your life turn upside down and just having a pivot and just leaning into
Yeah.
the joy. So I've just had those experiences, and I have those family members that mean so much to me that have all allowed me to see them experience these things, because a lot of times us as adults, we like shield our kids from any hardship, but they really let me, because I was the third, I was the baby, right? So you almost like get to be a fly on the wall of everything that's real, when you're the third. So having just like absorbed that spirit of things, I realized things happen. You don't get so stuck in your opinion, your thoughts, that you can't pivot. So
Mm-hmm.
it comes in handy with my job where I navigate performers' emotions, directors' vision, productions' timelines and budgets. Everybody has high stakes, and all of them super important. Like, I don't go actors here, director here, production here. It's an umbrella, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And the clearer the director is on their vision, and the clearer the performers are on their boundaries, and the most informed I can be about the production as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
makes me a useful tool, part of the team, part of the whole crew. So